The winter of 1811 descended upon Northwell Hall like a verdict, cold, unrelenting, and with the quiet finality of a judge's gavel. Lady Mara Ellington stood by the grand ballroom's periphery, her gloved fingers wrapped around a glass of untouched champagne as violins spilled their notes across the candle-lit expanse. 32 winters had graced her features with a dignity that society had mistaken for plainness, her widowhood worn like an invisible shroud that kept dancers at bay. "Observe how she stands," whispered Lady Pembroke behind her fan, always at the edge as though the centre might burn her. "When one has neither beauty nor fortune to recommend oneself," replied Mrs. Harrington with practiced sympathy, "prudence dictates one should not expect invitation." Their words, though hushed, carried the precise volume necessary for humiliation, a skill honed through seasons of calculated cruelty. Mara did not flinch. 5 years of widowhood had taught her that stillness was the only dignity allowed to women like her. The Marchioness of Halford swept past in a cloud of French perfume, her youngest daughter in tow, a fresh bloom of 17 summers, her cheeks flushed with anticipation rather than embarrassment. "My dear Lady Ellington," she said, pausing with deliberate charity, "how good of you to attend. I was just remarking to Lord Calverne how resilient you remain, despite everything, that delicate euphemism for disaster. For a husband who had loved her briefly before illness claimed him, for the child they had never conceived, for the rumors that followed, suggesting she had somehow failed in the mysterious duties of the marital chamber. Your kindness overwhelms me, Marchioness," Mara replied, her voice steady as northern stars. "How fortunate your daughter appears tonight, the very image of spring amid our winter." The Marchioness's smile tightened. She had expected defeat, not composure. "Come, Sophia," she commanded her daughter. "Lady Worcester was most particular about introducing you to her nephew." They departed in a rustle of silk, leaving Mara to the familiar solitude of being observed rather than seen. The vast ballroom, with its constellation of chandeliers, seemed to shrink around her, pushing her ever closer to the wall-papered margins of existence. It was then that she noticed him, the Duke of Rowan Ainsworth, standing beside the grand fireplace, his gaze fixed not on the young debutantes pirouetting before him, but on her. His eyes, the color of winter fog, held neither pity nor interest, but something rarer, attention. He watched her as one might observe a painting whose meaning remained elusive. A collision of nervous footmen broke their exchange, as a silver tray of crystal glasses shattered against the marble floor. The music faltered, conversation suspended, and every eye turned to the spectacle of broken things, every eye save his. Later, as guests departed and carriages lined the gravel drive, Mara found herself alone in the small gallery adjacent to the ballroom. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors gazed down from gilded frames, their judgment spanning centuries. "You admire the Ainsworth collection?" His voice came quietly from behind her. She turned, composure momentarily fractured. The Duke stood framed by the doorway, his formal attire unblemished despite the evening's length. "I admire their certainty, Your Grace," she replied, indicating a particularly severe gentleman whose eyes seemed to follow the viewer. "How comforting to exist in a world where one's place is never questioned." "And is your place so frequently questioned, Lady Ellington?" The directness of his inquiry, delivered without the customary cushion of social pleasantries, startled her. "A widow without fortune or extraordinary beauty? The question, Your Grace, is rather whether I have a place at all." His expression remained unchanged, yet something in his posture softened. "I find society's arithmetic curiously flawed. It calculates worth by the most transient of qualities, and yet we are all bound by its sums." She looked away, her fingers instinctively seeking the small silver mirror in her reticule, a habitual gesture of self-assessment. "No one marries a woman like me," she said softly, the confession escaping before wisdom could contain it. The Duke moved closer, the distance between them now measured in heartbeats rather than propriety. She braced herself for polite dismissal, for the practiced sympathy she had come to anticipate. Instead, he smiled, not with condescension, but with a gentle certainty that transformed his austere features. "Then you know little of love," he said. The grandfather clock in the corridor struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through the gallery like a summons. Neither moved, as though the moment existed in a pocket of time separate from the world beyond. From the entrance hall came the steward's voice, calling for the Duke's carriage to be brought around. The spell broke. He bowed with formal grace. "Good evening, Lady Ellington." "Good evening, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady despite the peculiar trembling within. He departed, footsteps fading into silence. Only then did Mara withdraw the small mirror from her reticule. In its reflection she saw what she had always seen, unremarkable features arranged in dignified resignation. Yet something had changed. The mirror captured not only her face, but also the candlelight behind her, a single flame, unexpected and persistent, refusing to be extinguished. Dawn arrived reluctantly, as though winter light required persuasion to venture through leaded windows. Mara sat at her writing desk, correspondence neglected before her, mind still traversing the strange territory of the previous evening. The Duke's words lingered like a half-remembered melody, elusive yet persistent. "Then you know little of love." 5 words, spoken without flourish, yet they had somehow altered the landscape of her thoughts. Her modest parlour at Briarwood Cottage, a Grace and Favour residence on the Northwell estate, seemed smaller this morning, as though her consciousness had expanded beyond its papered walls. For 5 years, she had accepted her place as the respectable widow, clinging to propriety like a lifeline in treacherous waters. Now, a single sentence threatened that careful equilibrium. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Her maid, Agnes, entered with an envelope upon a silver tray. "From Northwell Hall, my lady. A footman awaits your reply." The heavy cream paper bore the Ainsworth seal, a falcon with wings outstretched. Mara broke the wax with trembling fingers, unfolding the letter with care that belied her racing pulse. "Lady Ellington, the Northwell Library, contains several volumes on botanical illustration that may interest you, given your acknowledged appreciation of certainty and precision. My mother, the Dowager Duchess, maintains Thursday afternoons as her reading hour, and would welcome your companionship from 2 o'clock, should your engagements permit. Respectfully, Ainsworth." The note, formal to the point of austerity, contained no reference to their exchange, no acknowledgement of words that had kept her wakeful through the night. Mara folded it carefully, considering its meaning beneath its message. "Will there be a reply, my lady?" Agnes inquired, her youthful face revealing more curiosity than propriety would sanction. "Yes," Mara said, reaching for her pen. "I shall attend." The maid departed with her mistress's acceptance, leaving Mara to contemplate the strange turn of fate. An invitation to Northwell's library was unremarkable. The Dowager Duchess often received select company during her reading hours, yet the timing suggested intention rather than coincidence. By Thursday afternoon, snow had begun to fall in earnest, blanketing the countryside in silent white. Mara's modest carriage navigated the drive to Northwell Hall, each hoofbeat muffled by fresh powder. The great house loomed against the winter sky, its stone facade softened by weather. A footman escorted her through corridors lined with ancestral portraits, their eyes following her progress with painted judgment. The Northwell Library occupied the east wing, its windows overlooking frost-covered gardens. Shelves reached toward ornate ceilings, ladders providing access to leather-bound knowledge that spanned centuries. "Lady Ellington," announced the footman, retreating after her entrance. The Dowager Duchess, Lady Celestine Ainsworth, sat near the fire, a book open upon her lap. Her silvered hair was arranged simply, adorned with a single blue ribbon. Though advanced in years, her posture remained regal, her gaze clear as cut crystal. "How good of you to brave the weather, Lady Ellington," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite. "I find winter afternoons particularly conducive to companionable silence." "You are most kind to include me in your ritual, Your Grace," Mara replied, settling into the offered seat. "Kindness has little to do with it," the older woman replied with unexpected frankness. "I select my companions based on their capacity for meaningful conversation rather than fashionable chatter." A movement by the window drew Mara's attention. The Duke stood silhouetted against the falling snow, his back to the room as he contemplated the whitened landscape. He turned at their exchange, his expression guarded yet attentive. "My son joins us occasionally," Lady Celestine explained, following Mara's gaze. "He claims to seek particular volumes, though I suspect he simply prefers the library's peace to the demands of his position." The Duke approached, bowing slightly. "Lady Ellington, I trust you found the drive tolerable despite the weather." "Quite manageable, Your Grace. Snow grants even the most ordinary landscape unexpected dignity." Something like approval flickered across his features. An astute observation. Beauty often emerges not from perfection, but from transformation. The conversation might have continued, but the library door opened to admit an unexpected figure. Lord Calverne entered with the confidence of familiar relation, though his presence seemed to lower the temperature beyond what winter dictated. Aunt Celestine, he greeted the dowager, before turning to the Duke with a bow that emphasized form over sincerity. Cousin, I had not expected to find you engaged in such domestic pursuits. His gaze shifted to Mara, assessment evident in his cool appraisal. Lady Ellington, what an unexpected pleasure. Lord Calverne, she acknowledged, with a slight inclination of her head. The newcomer moved to warm himself by the fire, though the chill he brought seemed impervious to flame. Tall and precisely dressed, with features that might have been handsome were they not arranged in perpetual calculation, he surveyed the room as though taking inventory. I've come directly from London, he announced, removing his gloves with deliberate slowness. The season begins early this year. Already speculation runs rampant regarding eligible matches. His eyes rested momentarily on Mara, the implication clear. She numbered among neither the eligible nor the speculated. How fascinating, replied the Dowager Duchess, her tone suggesting precisely the opposite. Though I cannot imagine London gossip holds much interest for any of us here. Oh, but it should, Calverne insisted, a smile touching his lips without reaching his eyes. Particularly for Rowan. The Prince Regent himself inquired after your marital intentions. A duke approaching 40 without an heir, it raises concerns in certain circles. The Duke's expression remained unchanged, though something in his posture suggested steel beneath silk. I've found, cousin, that those most concerned with my private affairs are typically those with the least right to inquire. A tense silence descended, broken only by the fire's crackling and the faint tick of the mantel clock. Mara felt the weight of unspoken history between the men, a current running beneath polite exchanges. Lady Celestine closed her book with decisive finality. Lord Calverne, you must be fatigued from your journey. Perhaps you would prefer to refresh yourself before dinner. The dismissal, though couched in consideration, was unmistakable. Calverne bowed with exaggerated deference. As always, your concern touches me deeply, Aunt. His gaze swept the room once more. Lady Ellington, I look forward to further acquaintance. One hears so much, yet knows so little. After his departure, the library seemed to exhale collectively. The Dowager Duchess shook her head in quiet disapproval. My nephew possesses every advantage save character, she remarked, a failing for which fine tailoring cannot compensate. She rose gracefully despite her years. I believe I shall rest before dinner. Lady Ellington, you are most welcome to explore our collection. My son will ensure you find whatever you seek. With that strategic withdrawal, the Dowager left Mara and the Duke in a silence heavy with implication. Snow continued to fall beyond the windows, enclosing the library in a world apart. Your cousin seems attentive to social matters, Mara observed, searching for neutral ground. Calverne's attentions rarely extend beyond self-interest, the Duke replied, moving to the shelves and selecting a volume bound in green leather. As next in line should I die without issue, he maintains a vested interest in my continued bachelorhood. He presented the book to her, a collection of botanical illustrations, precisely as his note had mentioned. You will find these rendered with particular accuracy. The artist valued truth above flattery. Their fingers brushed as she accepted the volume, a momentary contact that nonetheless sent awareness coursing through her. The Duke held her gaze, something unspoken in his expression. Why did you invite me here? She asked suddenly, propriety surrendering to the need for clarity. Because, he answered, in a room of performers you alone seem to have no role to play. Before she could respond, a distant bell chimed, signaling the hour. He stepped back, resuming the distance that position demanded. You are welcome to borrow the volume, Lady Ellington. Books, unlike people, reveal their nature honestly when examined. She clutched the book to her chest like a shield. And what nature do you perceive in me, Your Grace, upon such limited examination? His expression softened into something approaching the smile from the previous night. One worthy of closer study, Lady Ellington. Most decidedly. Outside, the snow fell with increasing determination, transforming the world into blank pages awaiting inscription. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, carried by a liveried footman whose impassive face revealed nothing of its contents. Cream paper, red wax seal bearing the Ainsworth crest, formal in every particular, yet its arrival quickened Mara's pulse. The Dowager Duchess of Northwell requests the pleasure of Lady Ellington's company at dinner, Friday next at 7 o'clock, carriages at 11. A dinner invitation, unremarkable in itself, yet Mara understood its significance. The Dowager's intimate gatherings were exclusive affairs, carefully curated assemblies where conversation held greater currency than fashion. To be included signified recognition beyond mere charity. 5 days remained to prepare, each hour stretching like taut silk. Mara inventoried her wardrobe with pragmatic assessment. The lavender silk, 5 seasons old but well preserved. The grey muslin, severe but dignified. Nothing new, nothing remarkable, nothing to suggest she attached particular importance to the occasion. The grey, she decided, understated elegance better suited a widow of her circumstances than any attempt at rejuvenation. Friday arrived with mercurial weather, afternoon sunshine yielding to evening mist that crept across the grounds like spectral fingers. As her carriage approached Northwell Hall, lanterns illuminated the facade, windows glowing with promised warmth against encroaching darkness. The entrance hall buzzed with arrival activity, footmen receiving cloaks, ladies adjusting final details of coiffure and countenance, gentlemen exchanging brisk pleasantries. Mara surrendered her modest wrap, conscious of eyes that assessed without appearing to observe. Among the guests, she recognized several county families of note, Sir William and Lady Hargrove, whose agricultural improvements were discussed in London papers, Judge Barrett and his formidable wife, whose drawing room served as unofficial courthouse for social verdicts, the widowed Mrs. Pembroke, whose sharp eyes missed nothing while her sharper tongue forgave less. Lady Ellington. The greeting came from Helena Moorcroft, whose golden curls and porcelain complexion had launched 100 matrimonial campaigns across 3 seasons. How unexpected to find you here. The observation, delivered with practiced sweetness, carried its barb nonetheless. Helena had once been engaged to Mara's cousin, an arrangement dissolved upon discovery of his gambling debts. The broken betrothal had soured into silent resentment, transferred inexplicably to Mara herself. "Miss Moorcroft," Mara acknowledged with practiced composure, "the Dowager Duchess honors me with her invitation." "Indeed." Helena's perfect lips curved into a smile that conveyed volumes of unspoken doubt. One must admire her Grace's charitable inclinations. Before Mara could respond, the butler announced dinner, saving her from formulating a reply both dignified and deflecting. The guests processed toward the dining room, a gilded procession of wealth and consequence. She found herself seated between Judge Barrett and a gentleman she did not recognize, a strategic placement that suggested the Dowager's careful consideration rather than afterthought. Across the table sat the Duke, flanked by Helena Moorcroft and Lady Hargrove. His expression, as always, revealed little, though his eyes met Mara's briefly as guests settled into their places. "Lady Ellington," Judge Barrett began, "I understand you maintain a small garden at Briarwood Cottage. My wife speaks highly of your winter roses." "Your wife is too generous," Mara replied, grateful for the neutral topic, "though I confess a particular affection for plants that bloom against expectation." The gentleman to her left, later introduced as Mr. Jonathan Lefford, the estate's head gardener and the Duke's childhood companion, leaned slightly toward their conversation. "Persistence against adversity often produces the most remarkable results," he observed, his voice carrying the gentle authority of one who knows earth and growth intimately. "Your winter roses survive because they've adapted to harsh conditions, not despite them." The observation, ostensibly about horticulture, resonated with something deeper. Mara studied him with new interest, his hands weathered but elegant, his attire simple but impeccably maintained, his eyes reflecting intelligence undiminished by formal education's absence. "You speak as one who understands transformation, Mr. Lefford." "I merely observe nature's wisdom, Lady Ellington. Plants teach patience to those willing to listen." Their conversation flowed with unexpected ease, covering topics from botanical classification to the merits of wilderness against formal gardens. Halfway through the fish course, Mara realized she had momentarily forgotten the weight of others' assessment, a rare respite from perpetual vigilance. Across the table, Helena's melodious laugh drew attention as she leaned toward the Duke, her golden curls catching candlelight like spun sunshine. "Your Grace, surely you cannot be serious. 3 months in the country would be a sentence of unendurable boredom for any person of spirit." "Perhaps," the Duke replied, his tone level. "What constitutes spirit differs in our understanding, Miss Moorcroft. I find sustained attention to one place reveals depths that transient amusement cannot access." "How solemnly expressed," Helena countered, touching his arm with practiced familiarity. "One might suspect you of philosophy rather than conversation." The Duke's gaze shifted briefly to Mara. "I believe meaningful exchange need not sacrifice substance for charm." Lord Calverne, seated at the table's far end, interjected with cutting precision. My cousin's monastic tendencies are well documented, though one wonders whether principle or merely disinclination guides his withdrawal from society's pleasures. A subtle tension descended, felt rather than observed. The Dowager Duchess, enthroned at the table's head, intervened with gracious authority. Calvern, you mistake solitude for withdrawal. Some cultivate inner gardens, while others merely display borrowed flowers. The metaphor, delivered with smiling serenity, nonetheless silenced further provocation. Conversation resumed its polite circulation. Courses arrived and departed with choreographed precision, and candles burned steadily lower in silver holders. Later, when ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, leaving gentlemen to port and politics, Helena approached Mara with determined sociability. "You seemed quite engaged with Mr. Lefford at dinner," she observed, adjusting her bracelet with delicate precision. "How refreshing to find you in animated conversation." The implication, that animation was unusual for Mara, hung between them, neither acknowledged nor denied. "Mr. Lefford possesses genuine knowledge rather than mere opinion," Mara replied evenly, a distinction increasingly rare in contemporary discourse. Helena's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of concern. "Dear Lady Ellington, you mustn't allow widowhood to render you severe. It's most unbecoming, particularly when one lacks other compensating qualities." The barb, delivered with practiced precision, found its mark. Mara felt the familiar constriction in her throat, the physical manifestation of dignity, maintained at cost. "We each adapt to life circumstances as character permits, Miss Moorcroft," she replied, her voice steady, despite internal trembling. "Some find depth in adversity, others merely perfect its performance." Before Helena could respond, the Dowager Duchess approached, her silver-threaded gown rustling like autumn leaves. "Lady Ellington, would you join me by the fire? I find myself craving sensible conversation." The rescue, though welcome, carried its own significance, noticed by every lady present. To be singled out by the Dowager was distinction indeed. Mara followed her hostess to the fireplace's intimate circle, conscious of Helena's thwarted expression and the considering glances of other guests. "You manage provocation with admirable restraint," Lady Celestine observed once they were seated, "though I suspect it extracts greater toll than you reveal." Mara's surprise must have shown, for the older woman smiled with gentle understanding. "Age grants certain permissions, my dear, among them the freedom to acknowledge what younger women must pretend not to notice." The Dowager adjusted her blue ribbon with practiced fingers. "Miss Moorcroft's arrows are precise because they target vulnerability. Yet she fails to recognize that wounds, once healed, become sources of strength rather than weakness." "Your Grace is most perceptive," Mara replied, uncertain how to navigate this unexpected territory. "Necessity rather than gift," Lady Celestine corrected. "I've observed human nature through 8 decades, 4 as wife to a powerful man, 3 as mother to his heir, and now 1 as witness to what remains." Her clear eyes held Mara's with unexpected intensity. "Tell me, Lady Ellington, what do you seek from this season of your life?" The question, direct and unadorned, startled Mara with its presumption of intimacy, yet something in the Dowager's manner invited honesty rather than performance. "Dignity," she answered after a moment's consideration, "and perhaps purpose beyond mere survival." Lady Celestine nodded slowly, as though confirming a private theory. "Both worthy aspirations, though I suspect there remains capacity for more." She glanced toward the door as it opened to admit the gentleman. "We shall continue this conversation another time." The evening progressed with cards and music. Helena performed at the pianoforte with technical perfection, her golden beauty complemented by accomplished execution. Polite applause followed each piece, acknowledgement of display rather than connection. When the Duke approached Mara as carriages were announced, conversation throughout the room adjusted to accommodate observation. "Lady Ellington, might I offer you a volume on alpine flora? I recalled your interest in resilient blooms." "You are most thoughtful, Your Grace," she replied, conscious of attention measuring each syllable exchanged. He presented a slim book, its leather binding worn with appreciative handling rather than neglect. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, a moment of contact unremarkable to observers, yet electric in private awareness. "Some beauty," he said quietly, "reveals itself only to those who recognize value beyond conventional appraisal." The statement, ostensibly about botanical specimens, carried resonance beyond its surface meaning. Mara met his gaze with careful neutrality, though something within her responded to the underlying current. I shall study it with appropriate attention, Your Grace. Lord Calverne appeared beside them, his expression arranged in pleasant inquiry that nonetheless suggested interruption rather than coincidence. Cousin, you've become a veritable lending library. One wonders what treasures you reserve for special appreciation. The Duke's expression cooled perceptibly. Books, like Friendship Calverne, find their proper recipients through affinity rather than calculation. The exchange, though brief, left an impression of swords touching in preliminary assessment. Mara sensed currents beneath the surface, history and tension beyond her knowledge. As her carriage departed Northwell Hall, mist had thickened to light rain, droplets catching lantern light like suspended stars. Mara opened the book upon her lap, running fingertips over pages illustrated with flowers that thrived in adverse conditions. Between two pages lay a pressed violet, modest, perfect, and placed with deliberate care. She touched the dried bloom gently, aware of symbolism beyond coincidence. In the language of flowers, violet spoke of faithfulness, modesty, and affection. Whether the Duke had placed it with such intention remained uncertain, yet the possibility itself quickened her pulse. The book closed over the violet, preserving it between pages. Outside, rain transformed to gentle snow, white against midnight darkness, a world transforming while she watched. February's chill tightened its grip on Northwell, transforming the landscape into a tableau of crystalline severity. Mara stood at her cottage window, observing how morning light fractured against frost-covered gardens. The violet from the Duke's book lay pressed between glass in a small frame upon her desk, a private token, significance known only to herself. 3 weeks had passed since the Dowager's dinner. 3 weeks of careful correspondence, notes accompanying botanical volumes, observations on winter gardens, invitations to the library that walked the narrow path between propriety and pursuit. Society had begun to notice, whispers circulating like draughts beneath doorways. "A curious development at Northwell," remarked Mrs. Pembroke during yesterday's parish gathering. "The Duke appears to have developed scholarly interests that frequently coincide with Lady Ellington's visits." The observation, delivered with studied neutrality, nonetheless carried unmistakable implication. Mara had maintained composed indifference, though her heart performed a traitorous flutter beneath her modest bodice. Agnes entered the parlour, interrupting Mara's reflection. "A letter has arrived, my lady." The maid's expression held unusual gravity. "By private messenger rather than post." The envelope bore no crest or seal, plain cream paper with her name inscribed in unfamiliar hand. Mara broke the wafer with mounting curiosity, unfolding the single sheet within. "Lady Ellington, matters concerning your reputation require immediate attention. Information of a delicate nature has begun circulating in certain quarters. Meet me at St. Michael's Churchyard at 11 o'clock tomorrow if you wish to prevent public disclosure. A friend." The letter bore no signature, its message suspended between warning and threat. Mara read it twice, each word acquiring new weight with repetition. Information of a delicate nature. What secrets did she possess that merited anonymous concern? Her life, though marked by loss, had been conducted with scrupulous propriety, yet anxiety bloomed nonetheless, spreading tendrils through her composure. Even baseless accusations could tarnish reputation beyond recovery, particularly for a woman whose social position balanced on the knife edge of respectability. The churchyard stood empty when Mara arrived the following day, gravestones emerging from morning mist like silent sentinels. She had come alone, dismissing her maid with instructions to attend to household matters, a decision that now seemed imprudent as she surveyed the deserted grounds. "Lady Ellington." The voice emerged from shadow before its owner appeared, a slight man with features arranged in permanent calculation. "How gratifying to find you punctual." She recognized him as Lord Calverne's secretary, Mr. Silas Crowe, a man whose presence at social gatherings remained peripheral yet observant, like a spider positioned at its web's edge. "Mr. Crowe." Mara maintained formal distance, both physical and social. "I confess surprise at your cryptic summons. Necessity dictates discretion, my lady." He extracted a folded paper from his coat, handling it with theatrical care. "This document has come into my possession through channels I need not specify. Its contents concern your late husband's financial arrangements and certain inconsistencies therein." Ice formed in Mara's veins, though her expression remained controlled. "My husband's affairs were settled by his solicitor upon his death. There were no irregularities." Perhaps to untrained observation, Crowe's smile suggested unpleasant revelation. "However, closer examination reveals evidence of funds diverted from the Ashbury estate, funds that benefited a particular widow whose circumstances might otherwise have proven quite desperate. The accusation hung in damp morning air: embezzlement, theft, fraud, all impossible, all devastating if whispered in the right ears. "You speak falsehood, sir, and risk much in doing so." Mara's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled within her muff. "Truth and falsehood matter less than perception, Lady Ellington." He tucked the paper away with practiced smoothness. "Society's judgment seldom awaits evidentiary confirmation." Comprehension dawned with sickening clarity. "This is not about my husband's affairs. What does Lord Calvern seek through this charade?" Crow's expression registered momentary surprise before resuming calculated neutrality. "My lord's interests need not concern you. What should concern you, however, is the circulation these documents might achieve, unless their discovery proves unnecessary." "You speak in riddles, sir. State your purpose plainly." "Very well." He stepped closer, lowering his voice, though no one was present to overhear. "The Duke's interest in you has been noted with concern by those who wish him to fulfill his familial obligations appropriately. Your continued association presents complications." The threat's true nature emerged from shadow. Not financial ruin, but romantic interference. Mara felt simultaneous relief and deeper dread. "You suggest I sever connection with Northwell to prevent fabricated scandal." "I suggest discretion serves all parties. The Duke requires a suitable match. Young, accomplished, and of impeccable lineage, your presence distracts from this essential duty." Crow's voice softened to false sympathy. "Surely you cannot imagine yourself a duchess, Lady Ellington. Such delusion would prove painful when inevitably dispelled." Each word struck with precision, targeting doubts she herself had harbored through sleepless nights. What could she possibly offer a duke beyond momentary diversion from matrimonial expectations? "The Duke's associations are his to determine," she replied, dignity her only shield, "as are mine." Admirable resolve, though perhaps misplaced. Crow adjusted his gloves with meticulous attention. "Consider carefully, Lady Ellington. Reputation once compromised seldom recovers, particularly for women of your particular circumstance." He departed with a bow precise in its mockery, leaving Mara alone among weathered gravestones. Above, ravens circled against pearl-grey sky, their harsh calls echoing across hallowed ground. She remained motionless, mind racing through implications and possibilities. The threat, though constructed of falsehood, carried genuine danger. Society required neither proof nor trial to condemn, particularly when condemnation aligned with existing prejudice. The church bell tolled 11, its resonance rippling through bone and stone alike. Mara squared her shoulders, decision crystallizing with each reverberating note. Intimidation would not dictate her actions, though prudence might inform them. That afternoon she penned a note declining the Dowager's invitation to Thursday's reading circle, citing a fabricated indisposition. The lie tasted bitter, yet seemed necessary armor against unseen adversaries. The reply arrived with unexpected swiftness, not from the Dowager but from the Duke himself. "Lady Ellington, your absence creates a void not easily filled by substitution. If indisposition confines you to Briarwood, perhaps Northwell might bring consolation to you rather than awaiting your presence. I shall call tomorrow at 2 o'clock, unless expressly countermanded. With concern for your well-being, Ainsworth." The note, formal yet determined, suggested a persistence she had not anticipated. To refuse would require more elaborate fabrication, to accept invited confrontation with forces already mobilizing against her. When the Duke's carriage appeared the following afternoon, Mara watched its approach from her parlor window. Anxiety and anticipation engaged in silent combat beneath her ribs. He descended alone, without footman or companion, his tall figure stark against winter landscape. Agnes announced him with wide-eyed solemnity, clearly overwhelmed by ducal presence in their modest dwelling. "Your Grace." Mara curtsied, conscious of her simple day dress and informal surroundings. "This is unexpected honor." "Is it?" His gaze held gentle challenge. "My note specified intention unless contradicted. Indeed, though social forms often employ expression without expectation of fulfillment, I find such performances wasteful." He remained standing, declining the offered chair, particularly when concern is genuine rather than performative. Sunlight through leaded windows illuminated his features, revealing subtleties typically obscured by Northwell's grander spaces, the slight weathering at his temples, the faint lines bracketing his mouth, the intensity beneath his controlled exterior. "You need not have troubled yourself," Mara said, maintaining composure despite the thundering beneath her ribs. My indisposition is minor and temporary, yet sufficient to interrupt what appeared mutual satisfaction in our acquaintance. His directness, unmitigated by social cushioning, pierced her prepared defences. Has something occurred to diminish that satisfaction, Lady Ellington? The question invited confession. The strange encounter, the veiled threats, the ugly implications. Yet revelation risked expanding private intimidation into public scandal. She hesitated, caught between honesty and protection. Nothing beyond ordinary reflection, Your Grace. The evasion felt leaden upon her tongue. Solitude sometimes grants perspective otherwise obscured by pleasant distraction. And what perspective has solitude revealed? His tone remained even, though something in his posture suggested tightening vigilance. Merely that paths which diverge from established expectation often lead to difficult terrain. She moved toward the window, seeking distance from his discerning gaze. Society tolerates eccentricity in men of position, Your Grace. Women enjoy no such latitude. Society's tolerance concerns me less than its justice. He joined her at the window, close enough that conversation could proceed in lowered tones. Lady Ellington, Mara, if external forces have influenced your withdrawal, I would know of it. The use of her given name, intimate, unprecedented, momentarily suspended all calculation. She turned to face him, propriety surrendering to honesty's demand. There have been suggestions that our association invites misinterpretation. Partial truth seemed safer than complete disclosure. I would not have your reputation questioned through connection with mine. His expression darkened momentarily, before resuming careful neutrality. These suggestions, they came recently, perhaps delivered with concern that nonetheless carried threat beneath its surface. The accuracy of his assessment startled her into silence, confirmation enough for his perception. I suspected as much. His voice lowered further, intended for her alone though no one else was present. Calverne's methods lack subtlety when examined closely. Your cousin, she began, then hesitated, seeks advantage through any available avenue. The Duke completed her thought with unflinching clarity, including manipulation of those I hold in esteem. The implication that she numbered among those he valued hung in air between them, neither acknowledged nor denied. What would you have me do? She asked simply. Continue as before. His answer came without hesitation. Attend Thursday's reading. Select volumes that interest you. Walk the winter gardens when weather permits. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. In short, deny manipulation its victory through simple persistence. His certainty provided unexpected fortification to her wavering resolve, yet doubt remained, persistent as winter's grip. And if persistence invites escalation, then we shall meet it with appropriate response. The Duke's expression held something beyond aristocratic assurance, something resembling the quiet ferocity of personal rather than positional commitment. I did not survive Waterloo by surrendering to initial volleys, Lady Ellington. He departed shortly thereafter, leaving behind both reassurance and disquiet in equal measure. From her window, Mara watched his carriage disappear down the tree-lined drive, his words echoing in his absence. Deny manipulation its victory through simple persistence. She turned to her writing desk, extracting paper and pen with determined precision. The note to the Dowager, accepting Thursday's invitation with gratitude, flowed from her pen with newfound resolve. Outside, a single robin appeared upon bare branches, unexpected color against winter's monochrome palette. Its presence, defiant against season's severity, seemed confirmation of paths chosen rather than surrendered. The Northwell Library welcomed Mara like a sanctuary, its atmosphere of accumulated wisdom providing refuge from gathering storms. Thursday afternoon light filtered through tall windows, dust motes dancing in golden beams that illuminated leather spines and gilded titles. The Dowager Duchess sat in her accustomed chair, silver-threaded hair arranged beneath her habitual blue ribbon. Lady Ellington, genuine warmth infused her greeting. How pleasing to find your indisposition resolved. Your Grace is most kind, Mara replied, settling into the chair opposite. I find good health is often a matter of proper perspective. Indeed. The older woman's gaze held knowing assessment, perspective and occasionally proper allies. The conversation turned to literature, botanical studies, estate matters, safe territories navigated with mutual appreciation. The Duke did not appear, though his absence felt deliberate rather than coincidental. Mara found herself both relieved and disappointed, emotions tangled like winter brambles beneath her composed exterior. As afternoon light began its westward fade, a footman appeared with tea service and an unexpected announcement. "Lady Helena Moorcroft, Your Grace." Helena entered in a swirl of pale pink muslin and practiced vivacity, golden curls artfully arranged beneath a bonnet trimmed with silk roses. Her appearance, clearly arranged for effect rather than mere social obligation, struck discordant notes in the library's studious calm. "Dowager Duchess, how very kind of you to receive me without formal notification," she exclaimed, curtsying with precision. "I was visiting Lady Hargrove and simply could not pass Northwell without paying my respects." Her performance of spontaneity convinced neither recipient, though both maintained polite acceptance of its premise. "How fortunate that you arrive as tea is served," Lady Celestine observed, gesturing for another cup to be brought. "Lady Ellington and I were just discussing Mr. Wordsworth's observations on natural beauty." Helena's perfect features arranged themselves into interested animation. "How fascinating, though I confess my own reading tends toward more accessible works." Her gaze swept the library's impressive collection before settling on Mara with practiced surprise. "Lady Ellington, I had not expected to find you engaged in literary discourse." The subtle slight, suggesting Mara's intellectual capacity might not extend to serious conversation, landed with precision. Yet Mara found herself less wounded than formerly, as though recent events had provided unexpected insulation against such barbs. "We each pursue knowledge according to our capacities, Miss Moorcroft," she replied evenly. "Some through dedicated study, others through social observation." The dowager's lips twitched in suppressed appreciation. "Indeed. Now tell us, Miss Moorcroft, what news from Lady Hargrove's establishment? I understand her eldest son returns from Oxford this week." Helena accepted the conversational redirection with practiced grace, launching into elaborate descriptions of forthcoming entertainments planned for young Mr. Hargrove's homecoming. "There is to be a spring assembly at Hargrove Hall," she concluded, accepting a second cup of tea with delicate precision. "Quite select, though I'm certain invitations might be extended more broadly if suggestion came from the proper quarter." Her gaze flickered meaningfully toward the dowager. "How thoughtful," Lady Celestine replied, with perfect neutrality, "though I find myself increasingly selective regarding which gatherings merit attendance." The conversation continued through the ritual of tea, Helena performing vivacity, the dowager maintaining courteous detachment, Mara observing the currents beneath polite exchange. As shadows lengthened across the library floor, Helena rose to depart. "I mustn't impose further upon your gracious hospitality, Your Grace." She gathered her reticule with practiced elegance. "Lady Ellington, shall we walk out together? My carriage might convey you to Briarwood, saving your coachman the journey." The offer, though couched in consideration, suggested purpose beyond mere convenience. Mara glanced toward the dowager, who inclined her head slightly. Permission to depart, though not necessarily endorsement of the company. "You are most kind, Miss Moorcroft." Mara gathered her shawl and the book Lady Celestine had recommended, a volume of poetry by Anne Finch, Countess of Winchilsea, whose verses celebrated quiet observation over dramatic display. Outside, Helena's elegant carriage awaited, a footman standing at attention beside its polished door. Once settled within its plush interior, Helena's demeanor shifted, animation replaced by calculated assessment. "You have created quite an impression at Northwell, Lady Ellington." Her tone suggested puzzlement rather than admiration, particularly upon the Duke himself. Mara maintained neutral expression, though wariness rose within. "His Grace has shown kindness to many within his circle." Kindness, perhaps, but such particular attention. Helena adjusted her gloves with deliberate precision. "One hears whispers, you understand, speculations regarding his intentions toward a widow of mature years." The implication that Mara's age rendered romantic attention improbable landed with intended force. Yet beneath the insult lay revelation. Helena perceived her as potential rival rather than mere social inferior. "Whispers seldom reflect reality, Miss Moorcroft." Mara gazed through the carriage window at passing countryside, particularly when fueled by imagination rather than observation. "Oh, I observe most carefully." Helena leaned forward, lowering her voice, though no one could overhear. "For instance, I observed Mr. Silas Crowe in earnest conversation with you at St. Michael's Churchyard some days past, most unusual for a lady of your circumspection." The revelation struck like sudden frost. Helena had witnessed the churchyard meeting. Mara maintained composed features despite internal alarm. "Mr. Crowe delivered a message concerning parish matters," she replied, the falsehood necessary armor against more dangerous truths. Indeed, how curious that parish business required such secrecy. Helena's perfect lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. I wonder whether the Duke would find such clandestine exchanges equally innocent in interpretation. The threat emerged from polite rapping, insinuation delivered to the Duke that Mara maintained secret communication with his cousin's secretary, a whisper easily fashioned into suggestion of conspiracy. You mistake ordinary interaction for intrigue, Miss Moorcroft. Mara kept her voice level despite quickening pulse, though I understand some minds naturally incline toward dramatic narrative. Perhaps. Helena settled back against velvet cushions, satisfaction evident in her posture. Though narrative often crystallizes around available evidence, a respectable widow meeting privately with a gentleman not of her acquaintance, such evidence invites particular interpretation. The carriage slowed as they approached Briarwood's modest drive. Mara gathered her composure along with her belongings, preparing for dignified exit, despite internal turmoil. You seem most concerned with the Duke's impressions, Miss Moorcroft. She met the younger woman's gaze directly. One might almost suspect personal interest beyond mere social observation. A flash of something, anger perhaps, or simple recognition of being perceived accurately, crossed Helena's perfect features before resuming practiced pleasantry. The Duke's matrimonial prospects concern all who value Northwell's continued prosperity, she replied smoothly. A man of his position requires suitable alliance, youth, beauty, accomplished bloodlines, elements that secure future generations rather than merely satisfying temporary inclination. The carriage halted before Briarwood Cottage. Mara descended without awaiting the footman's assistance, turning to deliver parting words through the still open door. How fortunate for suitable candidates that you maintain such vigilant concern for their prospects. Her voice remained pleasant despite the steel beneath. Good day, Miss Moorcroft. Mara entered her cottage as the carriage departed, maintaining dignity until privacy permitted its temporary surrender. She sank into the parlor's window seat, mind racing through implications of this new development. Helena had witnessed the churchyard meeting, knowledge that granted dangerous leverage. Whether she would employ it immediately or reserve it for strategic deployment remained uncertain, though her character suggested the latter. Like an experienced card player, she would hold her advantage until maximum effect could be achieved. As twilight gathered beyond leaded windows, Mara considered her dwindling options. To withdraw from Northwell's circle would surrender to manipulation, exactly as the Duke had warned against. Yet continued association invited escalating risk to both reputation and heart. A knock at the cottage door interrupted her circular contemplation. Agnes appeared moments later, excitement evident despite attempts at proper restraint. A gentleman caller, my lady, Mr. Jonathan Lefford. The Duke's childhood friend and Northwell's head gardener stood in her modest entrance hall, hat held respectfully in weathered hands. His expression held gravity beyond social obligation. Lady Ellington, he began once they were seated in the parlor, I come on private business rather than estate matters. I gathered as much from your expression, Mr. Lefford. Mara studied him with careful attention. How might I assist you? It is rather how I might assist you, my lady. He leaned forward, voice lowered, though they were alone. I observed Miss Moorcroft's carriage departing as I arrived. Her interest in your affairs seems to have intensified of late. Mara's surprise must have shown, for he continued with increased urgency. Forgive my directness, Lady Ellington, but time permits little else. Miss Moorcroft called at Northwell this morning before visiting you, specifically seeking audience with Lord Calverne rather than the Dowager or Duke. Cold certainty settled in Mara's chest. They conspire together. So it would appear. Lefford nodded gravely. Their conversation, though conducted behind closed doors, concluded with expressions suggesting mutual satisfaction in some arrangement. You have remarkable powers of observation, Mr. Lefford. When one grows up alongside privilege without possessing it, he replied with simple dignity, observation becomes necessary survival. The statement revealed volumes about his position, friend to the Duke yet servant to the estate, navigating boundaries that separated their worlds despite childhood bonds. Why share these observations with me? Mara asked directly. Because 30 years of friendship grants certain knowledge of character. His weathered face softened with evident loyalty. The Duke values you beyond what propriety permits him to express. Those who wish him ill seek to target that value. The simple assessment, delivered without embellishment or romantic flourish, nonetheless confirmed what Mara had scarcely permitted herself to acknowledge. The Duke's interest transcended mere intellectual companionship or social courtesy. "What would you have me do with this knowledge, Mr. Lefford?" "Arm yourself with awareness," he replied without hesitation, "and perhaps consider that not all battles require fighting alone." He departed shortly thereafter, refusing refreshment in favor of returning to the estate before darkness completed its descent. Mara watched from her window as his figure receded down the lane, his warning echoing in his absence. That night, unable to find sleep's refuge, Mara extracted the violet frame from her desk drawer. The pressed flower, delicate, preserved, unchanged, seemed to offer silent testimony to possibilities beyond present circumstance. "Not all battles require fighting alone." The words repeated like whispered prayer as darkness yielded reluctantly to first light. With dawn came decision. Neither retreat nor surrender, but strategic advance. She would attend services at St. Michael's on Sunday, present herself at Northwell's Library on Thursday, and conduct herself with dignity rather than defensive withdrawal. Let Helena and Calverne conspire. Let whispers circulate. Truth possessed power beyond manipulation, if one held courage to stand within its light. Sunday dawned clear and cold, winter's grip beginning its gradual release as February yielded to March's uncertain temperament. St. Michael's Church stood silhouetted against pale blue sky, its ancient stone weathered by centuries of devotion and doubt alike. Mara arrived early, nodding to familiar parishioners as she took her accustomed seat midway down the nave. The congregation assembled gradually, tenant farmers in Sunday best, village shopkeepers and their families, gentry from surrounding estates. The social hierarchy visible in seating arrangements, with prominent families occupying front pews, while those of lesser consequence filled spaces behind. A murmur rippled through assembled worshippers as the Duke entered, accompanied by the Dowager Duchess. Their presence at parish services was not unprecedented, though sufficiently rare to merit notice. They proceeded to the Ainsworth family pew, the Dowager nodding graciously to acquaintances, while the Duke maintained dignified reserve. Moments later, Lord Calverne arrived with theatrical timing, Helena Moorcroft on his arm, an arrangement that raised eyebrows throughout the congregation. Their entrance, clearly calculated for maximum observation, succeeded in its purpose. Helena's spring green ensemble provided stark contrast to winter-subdued attire surrounding her, drawing every eye as she proceeded down the aisle with practiced grace. As they passed Mara's pew, Helena's gaze met hers briefly, triumphant assessment in that fleeting connection. Calverne inclined his head with exaggerated courtesy, his smile suggesting private amusement at some unshared jest. They continued forward, seating themselves directly behind the Duke and Dowager, proximity that proclaimed association without requiring invitation. The statement made without words, nonetheless, echoed loudly through the ancient nave. Reverend Hastings began the service with customary solemnity, his sermon addressing Christian fortitude against worldly trials. Mara found ironic comfort in his text, the testing of faith producing perseverance, perseverance producing character, character producing hope that would not disappoint. Throughout the service, she maintained composed attention, though awareness of calculated glances from Helena's direction occasionally disrupted her concentration. The younger woman's confidence suggested advantage already deployed rather than merely contemplated, whispers strategically placed, insinuations carefully cultivated. As the congregation rose for final hymn, Mara caught the Duke's gaze briefly across intervening pews. His expression revealed nothing to casual observation, though she detected something beneath its surface, concern, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement of shared understanding. Following benediction, parishioners gathered in the churchyard for customary exchanges of greeting and local news. Mara prepared to depart quietly when the Dowager Duchess approached, her progress toward Mara noted by every observant eye. "Lady Ellington," she began with characteristic directness, "I wonder if you might accompany me on a turn about the churchyard. These first hints of spring warrant appreciation before winter reasserts its claim." The invitation, publicly extended, could not be declined without comment. Mara accepted with composed gratitude, though awareness of Helena's narrowed gaze followed them as they proceeded along gravel pathways between ancient gravestones. "You bear scrutiny with admirable composure," the Dowager observed once they had achieved relative privacy, "though I suspect it extracts greater toll than outward appearance suggests." "Your Grace perceives with characteristic accuracy," Mara acknowledged, adjusting her gloves with careful precision, though necessity often mothers capacity previously undiscovered. Indeed, Lady Celestine indicated a stone bench positioned to catch weak March sunshine. "Shall we? My years grant privilege to rest while younger legs remain standing." Once seated, the dowager's expression shifted from social pleasantry to direct assessment. "You have acquired determined adversaries, Lady Ellington. Their methods, while predictable, nonetheless warrant serious consideration." The statement, delivered without preliminary cushioning, confirmed Mara's suspicions. The dowager had noted Helena and Calverne's alliance, perhaps even their specific strategies. "I confess uncertainty regarding appropriate response," Mara replied honestly. "Confrontation invites escalation, yet silence suggests admission. A perceptive assessment." Lady Celestine adjusted her blue ribbon with practiced fingers. When facing opponents who employ whispers, direct contradiction seldom proves effective. Rather, one must consider alternative narratives that render whispers irrelevant. Before Mara could request clarification, the dowager continued with renewed purpose. "The spring assembly at Hargrove Hall approaches, an event of sufficient consequence to merit Northwell's representation. I find myself disinclined toward extended social obligation at my age, yet propriety demands family presence." Her clear gaze held Mara's with quiet intensity. "I wonder if you might accompany my son as my representative. Your sensible nature would ensure appropriate observations return to me afterward." The invitation, for such it was despite its oblique presentation, struck Mara momentarily speechless. To attend a prominent social gathering as the Duke's companion would make unequivocal statement regarding his esteem, precisely countering whispers Helena might have cultivated. "Your Grace honors me with such consideration," she replied carefully, "though I wonder whether such arrangement might invite additional speculation rather than diminishing it." "Speculation persists regardless of action or inaction," Lady Celestine observed, with the certainty of decades' experience. "Better to have it flow in channels of one's choosing than surrender its direction to others." From across the churchyard came Helena's melodious laugh, perfectly calibrated to draw attention without appearing to seek it. She stood in animated conversation with several young gentlemen, her golden beauty luminous against the church's weathered stone. Lord Calverne observed from slight distance, satisfaction evident in his posture. "Consider carefully," the dowager advised, following Mara's gaze. "Youth and beauty possess undeniable advantage in initial engagement, yet lasting victory often belongs to patience and strategic positioning." Their conversation concluded shortly thereafter, the dowager departing to speak with Reverend Hastings, while Mara prepared for her solitary walk back to Briarwood. As she reached the churchyard gate, Mr. Lefford appeared beside her, his manner suggesting accidental encounter rather than deliberate interception. "A pleasant morning for walking, Lady Ellington," he observed, falling into step beside her. "Might I accompany you some distance? I have business in the village that takes me along your route." The arrangement, while technically proper, nonetheless invited observation. Mara noted Helena's attention shift toward them, calculation evident in her perfect features. "You are most kind, Mr. Lefford, though I would not delay your business." "No delay whatsoever," he assured her with quiet dignity. "Indeed, conversation makes the journey pass more pleasantly." They proceeded along the lane leading from church to village, maintaining proper distance, though speaking with ease that suggested established acquaintance rather than mere social politeness. "I observed Lord Calverne's particular attention this morning," Lefford remarked, once they had achieved distance from potential eavesdroppers. "His satisfaction suggests plans advancing according to design." "The dowager believes direct confrontation ineffective against whisper campaigns," Mara replied, choosing words with care. "She suggests alternative narrative rather than contradiction. Her Grace possesses wisdom earned through experience." He nodded thoughtfully. "Though I wonder whether you have considered that some battles, while appearing centered upon you, actually target different objectives entirely." The observation gave Mara pause. "You suggest I am merely convenient avenue rather than ultimate destination?" "Lord Calverne's ambitions extend beyond mere social distinction," Lefford confirmed, his tone suggesting long observation rather than recent discovery. "As next in line should the Duke remain childless, his interest in preventing advantageous marriage has practical, rather than merely malicious foundation." The assessment aligned with fragments Mara had assembled, yet completed the picture with disturbing clarity. She was not merely inconvenient association, but potential obstacle to inheritance. if the Duke's interest extended toward matrimony rather than mere companionship. You imply calculation beyond social manipulation, she observed. I merely suggest awareness of all dimensions. Lefford's weathered features arranged themselves in careful neutrality. The Duke faces pressure beyond Calvern's machinations, pressure from the estate, from tradition, from responsibility to position. His personal inclinations must navigate these forces rather than simply following their direction. They had reached the village square, where their paths would naturally diverge. Lefford paused, his expression softening from strategic assessment to simple humanity. Lady Ellington, forgive my presumption, but I have observed both you and the Duke these past months. Whatever whispers Helena and Calvern cultivate, whatever calculations drive their actions, they cannot fabricate what plainly exists between you. His voice lowered, though no one stood close enough to overhear. The Duke does not bestow attention without purpose nor respect without foundation. Before Mara could respond, he bowed with dignified respect. Good day, Lady Ellington. I trust your path home proves pleasant in this promising weather. He departed toward the village shops, leaving Mara to continue alone along the lane to Briarwood. His words accompanied her journey, providing unexpected fortification against doubts that had taken root since Helena's veiled threats. The following day brought correspondence from Northwell, formal invitation to the Hargrove Assembly, along with personal note from the Dowager confirming arrangements should Mara accept. The Duke himself added brief postscript in distinctive hand. Your presence would transform obligation into pleasure. A. She traced the single initial with fingertips, mind-traversing possibilities and implications. To accept invited both triumph and vulnerability, public declaration of connection that would render whispers temporarily irrelevant, yet potentially provoke more determined opposition. After careful consideration, she penned acceptance with composed gratitude. The decision, once made, brought curious serenity despite its attendant risks. That evening, as she reviewed her modest wardrobe for suitable assembly attire, Agnes arrived with unexpected delivery, a small package wrapped in plain paper, delivered by Northwell footman with instructions for Lady Ellington's hands alone. Inside lay a pair of evening gloves, finest kid leather in palest lavender, with delicate violet embroidery at each wrist. No note accompanied the gift, though its source required no explanation. The Duke had noted her wardrobe's limitations and addressed specific need without drawing attention to the gesture through formal acknowledgement. Mara held the gloves against her plain day dress, their elegant simplicity transforming, rather than merely accessorizing. The gesture communicated understanding beyond words, recognition of practical reality, without diminishing personal dignity. As March days lengthened toward spring, preparations for the Hargrove Assembly occupied local conversation. Reports circulated regarding imported musicians, exotic refreshments, special decorations, each detail amplifying anticipation among invited guests. 3 days before the event, as Mara completed final alterations to her silver-grey silk dress, 5 seasons old but well-preserved, Helena's carriage appeared unexpectedly at Briarwood. The unannounced arrival carried deliberate purpose, evident even before conversation commenced. Lady Ellington, Helena began, once they were seated in Mara's modest parlour, her perfect features arranged in practiced concern. I come on delicate mission that friendship demands despite potential discomfort. Indeed, Mara maintained neutral expression, though wariness rose within. How fortunate that I possess friendship worthy of such sacrifice. The irony passed unacknowledged as Helena continued with rehearsed sincerity. It has reached my attention that you intend accompanying the Duke to Hargrove's assembly, an arrangement that has generated considerable speculation. The Dowager Duchess requested my attendance as her representative, Mara corrected mildly, though I cannot govern speculation regardless of its foundation. Of course. Helena adjusted her gloves with careful precision. Yet as someone who values your reputation, I feel compelled to share certain observations that have circulated regarding your association with Northwell. She paused, clearly expecting entreaty to continue. When Mara remained silent, she proceeded with slightly diminished composure. There are whispers, you understand, regarding the nature of your frequent visits, suggestions that affection might have developed beyond appropriate bounds, that the Duke, she hesitated delicately, that his interest might not align with expectations appropriate to his position. The implication hung between them, that the Duke's attentions served physical rather than matrimonial purpose. The insult, though delivered with affected reluctance, nonetheless struck its intended target. "How concerned you must be," Mara observed, her tone remaining even despite internal fury, "to deliver such painful intelligence personally rather than allowing it continued circulation without your intervention." Helena's perfect features registered momentary confusion before resuming practiced sympathy. "I merely thought you should be aware before appearing publicly in circumstances that might compound such unfortunate impressions." "Your thoughtfulness overwhelms me." Mara rose from her chair, signaling conversation's conclusion. "Though I find myself curious why such concern emerges now rather than when you witnessed my churchyard meeting with Mr. Crow, an event you found sufficiently interesting to observe, yet not mention until strategic advantage presented itself." The direct reference to Helena's previous threat visibly startled her. Composure momentarily fractured before reassembling into cold calculation. "I merely observed from distance," she replied carefully, though others might have drawn less charitable conclusions had they witnessed such clandestine exchange. "Indeed, how fortunate that discretion guided your response." Mara moved toward the parlor door with deliberate purpose. "I shall remember your concern when considering future actions, Miss Moorcroft. Your visit has been most illuminating." Once Helena had departed in evident dissatisfaction, Mara remained standing in her modest entrance hall, mind calculating implications of this new development. The visit confirmed suspicions that opposition had intensified rather than retreated, that Helena and Calverne perceived genuine threat in her connection with the Duke. That evening, as shadows lengthened across Briarwood's modest garden, Mara penned careful note to the Dowager, relating Helena's visit without embellishment or emotional coloring. The facts, plainly stated, required no additional commentary to reveal their purpose. The reply arrived the following morning, not from Lady Celestine but from the Duke himself. His message, brief and direct, arrived by private messenger rather than regular post. "Lady Ellington, developments suggest increased vigilance rather than retreat. A trusted carriage shall collect you at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening for Hargrove Hall. No additional correspondence should pass between us before then. Until tomorrow, eh?" The note's gravity confirmed Mara's growing certainty that forces gathering against them had progressed beyond mere social manipulation toward something more determined. She burned the message in her parlor fire, watching flames consume both paper and words until only ash remained. Tomorrow evening would bring matters to head. Public declaration of connection that neither whispers nor manipulation could diminish. Whatever resulted from that declaration remained uncertain, yet Mara faced its approach with unexpected calm. The violet gloves lay upon her dressing table, tangible evidence of consideration beyond convenience. Whatever transpired at Hargrove Hall, she would face it with dignity that no whisper could diminish and grace that no calculation could compromise. Outside, early crocuses pushed through winter-hardened earth, their purple blooms defiant against season's lingering chill. Mara observed their persistence with newfound appreciation, recognizing kindred determination in their quiet emergence. The first swallow appeared against clearing sky, its arrival heralding spring's approach, despite winter's reluctant retreat. Transformation had begun, in garden, in season, in heart. Tomorrow would determine whether that transformation led toward renewal or retreat, victory or vulnerable defeat. Hargrove Hall blazed with light against the early spring evening, its windows glowing like earthbound stars across darkened grounds. Carriages lined the circular drive, disgorging guests in their finest attire, a procession of wealth and consequence entering halls prepared for their approval. Footmen in livery guided arrivals through massive oak doors, while strains of distant music beckoned from within. The Duke's carriage approached with measured dignity, rather than ostentatious haste. Mara sat opposite him, silver-grey silk arranged with careful precision, the violet-embroidered gloves his only visible gift upon her person. Neither had spoken much during the journey, comfortable silence suggesting understanding beyond necessity for constant articulation. "We shall be observed," he remarked as they approached the entrance, lamplight illuminating his austere features, "with particular attention to every nuance of interaction." "I have become accustomed to scrutiny," Mara replied, smoothing her skirts with gloved hands, "though I confess the intensity may prove novel this evening." His expression softened momentarily. "You face battlefield conditions with remarkable composure, Lady Ellington." "Hardly battlefield, Your Grace. Merely social engagement with slightly elevated stakes." A ghost of smile touched his lips. "I have faced both cannon and drawing rooms. The latter often proves more dangerous to survival." Their carriage halted before Hargrove Hall's entrance, footmen rushing forward to assist their descent. The Duke emerged first, turning to offer his hand with formal courtesy that nonetheless conveyed deeper consideration. As Mara's fingers met his, even through layers of glove and propriety, connection passed between them, unspoken understanding that transcended circumstance. "Shall we?" he asked simply. They entered together, her hand resting lightly upon his arm, as custom dictated. The entrance hall bustled with arrivals, conversations flowing around them like water around stone. Their progress drew immediate notice, whispers following their advance like ripples across still water. Sir William Hargrove greeted them with effusive courtesy, his ruddy features registering momentary surprise at their paired arrival before social training reasserted control. "Duke of Northwell, what extraordinary pleasure to welcome you to our modest gathering," he bowed with exaggerated deference. "And Lady Ellington, how delightful to find you in such distinguished company." The observation, though couched in politeness, nonetheless acknowledged exceptional circumstance. The Duke's formal response conveyed neither apology nor explanation for their arrangement, merely acceptance of welcome, with dignified appreciation. They proceeded toward the ballroom, where musicians played preliminary melodies as guests assembled in preparation for the evening's first dance. The chamber glowed with candlelight reflected in mirrors and crystal, creating illusion of endless illumination against encroaching darkness beyond. Lord Calverne stood near the entrance, engaged in conversation with several gentlemen of consequence. His expression momentarily faltered upon observing their arrival, calculation evident in his swift recovery. "Cousin," he greeted the Duke with practiced warmth that never reached his eyes. "How unexpectedly traditional to find you attending social engagement." "Tradition occasionally merits participation," the Duke replied evenly, "particularly when accompanied by worthy company." His gaze remained upon Mara as he spoke, the statement unmistakable in its implication. Calverne's jaw tightened briefly before resuming social pleasantry. "Lady Ellington," he acknowledged with slight bow, "you appear remarkably composed for one so recently subject to concerning rumors." The reference, deliberately vague yet pointed, confirmed Mara's suspicion regarding source of whispered insinuations. She met his gaze with calm dignity rather than defensive retreat. "Composure often reflects clear conscience rather than practiced performance, Lord Calverne." Her voice remained pleasant, despite steel beneath its surface, though I understand the distinction might prove difficult to recognize without personal experience. His expression hardened momentarily before reassembling into practiced affability. How refreshing to find such rural fortitude, though one wonders whether simplicity translates effectively in more sophisticated environments. "Simplicity requires no translation," the Duke interjected, his tone suggesting conversation's conclusion. "Truth speaks universal language, regardless of audience." They moved away before Calverne could respond, proceeding into the ballroom's golden radiance. Guests parted before them like sea before vessel's prow, conversations momentarily suspended as attention focused upon their paired progress. Near the refreshment table stood Helena, resplendent in pale blue silk that complemented her golden beauty to perfection. Her expression upon noting their arrival registered successive emotions: surprise, calculation, determination, before settling into practiced social brightness. "Your Grace," she exclaimed, approaching with extended hand and strategic volume. "How unexpected to find you embracing festivity. And Lady Ellington, what extraordinary transformation evening attire achieves upon even the most ordinary canvas." The compliment, structured to contain its own negation, reflected Helena at her most calculated. Mara accepted it with composed acknowledgement, neither rising to provocation nor retreating from its intent. "Miss Moorcroft," the Duke responded with cool formality, "your observations never fail to reveal more about observer than subject." Helena's perfect features arranged themselves in momentary confusion before comprehension dawned. The Duke had recognized insult beneath compliment and addressed its source rather than its target. "You must forgive my directness," Helena recovered swiftly, fan opening with practiced precision. "I merely express admiration for Lady Ellington's unexpected elevation in social consequence." "Elevation suggests previous descent," the Duke observed, his tone remaining conversational despite underlying steel. "Yet worth remains constant, regardless of recognition. Some treasures require discerning eye rather than common assessment." Before Helena could formulate response, Sir William Hargrove approached with enthusiastic interruption. Duke of Northwell, the first dance commences momentarily. Might we prevail upon you to lead with Lady Ellington? Such distinguished couple would establish tone for the entire evening. The request, likely prompted by Lady Hargrove's social ambitions, nonetheless created perfect opportunity for public declaration. The Duke turned to Mara with formal inquiry. Would you honour me, Lady Ellington? The question, simple in phrasing yet complex in implication, invited more than mere dance. It offered public acknowledgement of connection, statement made through action rather than words. With pleasure, Your Grace. They took position as musicians completed tuning preparations. Around them, couples arranged themselves according to social hierarchy, the Duke and Mara at formation's head, their placement confirmation of status, regardless of whispered assessment. Helena stood opposite with young Mr. Hargrove, position of honour for unmarried lady, yet secondary to Mara's placement beside the Duke. Her perfect features maintained social animation, though calculations simmered beneath the surface. The music began, stately minuet rather than country dance, requiring precise movements and frequent partner exchanges. As they proceeded through opening measures, Mara felt curious serenity despite awareness of scrutiny from every quarter. You move with remarkable grace, the Duke observed during brief paired passage, as though born to navigate difficult terrain. Necessity teaches adaptation, she replied, executing turn with practiced precision, though certain partners ease the journey considerably. A subtle smile touched his lips, private expression amid public performance. Indeed, compatible partners transform obligation into pleasure. The dance continued through its formal patterns, each movement executed with precision, born of social training rather than natural inclination. When they parted for final exchange, Mara found herself briefly paired with Lord Calverne, whose appearance in the set had escaped earlier notice. "How charming to find you embracing visibility," he remarked as they circled one another, though one wonders whether spotlight proves flattering to those accustomed to shadows. "Light reveals truth in all circumstances," Mara replied, maintaining dance's rhythm despite conversation's undercurrents, though some preferred darkness for its capacity to obscure intention. His expression hardened momentarily before resuming social mask. Truth, like beauty, often proves subjective in assessment. What appears solid may dissolve under proper application of pressure. The threat, though veiled, nonetheless conveyed clear intention. Before Mara could respond, the pattern shifted, returning her to the Duke for dance's conclusion. As final notes faded into approving applause, he retained her hand momentarily longer than strict propriety dictated. "Well navigated," he murmured, approval evident beneath formal restraint. The evening progressed through established patterns, dancing, conversation, refreshment, promenade. Mara remained at the Duke's side throughout, their connection evident to every observer, yet maintained within propriety's boundaries. No declaration made beyond simple presence, yet meaning unmistakable to those with eyes to see. Near midnight, as musicians prepared for supper dance, Mr. Lefford appeared unexpectedly at the ballroom's periphery, his presence notable for its incongruity and fashionable gathering. He caught the Duke's attention with subtle gesture, urgency evident in his manner, despite attempt at inconspicuous communication. "If you will excuse me," the Duke murmured to Mara, "a matter requires brief attention." She watched as the men conferred in quiet corner, Lefford's expression grave as he delivered message beyond her hearing. The Duke's features remained composed, though something in his posture suggested increasing tension as conversation progressed. He returned moments later, controlled urgency beneath his calm exterior. "I apologize, Lady Ellington, but unexpected development at Northwell requires immediate attention." Concern rose within her. "Is the Dowager—" "My mother remains well," he assured her quickly. "The matter concerns estate business rather than family welfare. I must return directly, though I shall arrange alternative transportation to ensure your evening continues undisturbed." "Nonsense," she replied without hesitation. "I shall accompany you back to Northwell and proceed to Briarwood from there." Relief crossed his features briefly before resuming public composure. "You are most understanding. Our departure will undoubtedly provide conversational sustenance for weeks to come." "Let them feast," Mara replied with unexpected lightness. "Their hunger reveals more about their appetite than our substance." They made required farewells to Sir William and Lady Hargrove, offering legitimate though unspecified estate emergency as explanation for early departure. Their exit, observed by every eye in attendance, nonetheless occurred with dignity rather than dramatic haste. Once settled within the carriage, winter chill requiring additional blankets. Despite spring's official arrival, the Duke's formal reserve partially dissolved. "Forgive the abrupt extraction," he began, "though I confess relief at legitimate escape from continued performance. The emergency at Northwell, is it genuine or convenient fabrication?" His expression darkened. "Entirely genuine, I fear. Lefford received word that fire has broken out in the East Wing, deliberately set according to initial report." Alarm coursed through her. "Deliberate? Surely not. The library," he continued, confirming her unspoken fear. "Origin point precisely where most damage might result to irreplaceable volumes. Not random accident, but calculated destruction." Comprehension dawned with sickening clarity. "Lord Calvern." "So it appears." The Duke's expression revealed steel beneath aristocratic composure, though proving such connection presents significant challenge. "He remained at the assembly when we departed," Mara observed. "Perfect alibi established through public observation. While his instrument executed purpose elsewhere." The Duke's hands tightened momentarily. "Mr. Silas Crowe departed Hargrove Hall approximately 1 hour before Lefford received word of the fire." The carriage accelerated through darkness, hooves striking packed earth with increased urgency. Mara gazed through window at star-scattered sky, mind traversing implications of this escalation. "He targets what you value," she said quietly. First through whispered insinuation regarding personal connection, now through physical destruction of scholarly collection. Not merely scholarly collection. The Duke's voice lowered, despite privacy of their conveyance. "The library contains estate records, family documents, legal papers, evidence that might prove inconvenient to certain aspirations." They traveled remainder of journey in tense silence, each occupied with private calculation regarding motives and consequences. As they crested final hill before Northwell, orange glow became visible against night sky, confirmation of report's accuracy and situation's gravity. The Duke's expression hardened into grim determination. "Battle lines had been drawn with unmistakable clarity," he observed, though not perhaps with anticipated outcome. His hand found hers briefly in darkness, connection transcending gloves and circumstance. "Whatever results from this night's events, Lady Ellington, know that my esteem remains undiminished by external assault." The carriage continued its progress toward illuminated chaos, bearing them toward confrontation neither had anticipated, yet both now faced with clear-eyed recognition of its significance. Dawn broke over Northwell Hall with somber clarity, revealing night's devastation in unforgiving detail. The East Wing stood partially blackened, windows gaping like hollow eyes where glass had shattered from heat's intensity. Servants formed bucket chains from well to structure, dousing persistent embers that threatened renewed conflagration. Mara had remained throughout the night. Propriety surrendered to necessity as all available hands joined firefighting efforts. Her silver-grey silk now bore scorch marks and water stains, hair falling in disheveled waves, where careful arrangement had surrendered to practical urgency. Yet she continued directing servants with calm efficiency, coordinating removal of salvageable volumes from smoke-damaged shelves. The Dowager Duchess supervised from wheeled chair positioned at safe distance, her directions delivered with characteristic precision, despite evident distress. Upon their midnight arrival, she had greeted them with composed recognition of threat's significance, rather than mere property damage. "This goes beyond simple vandalism," she had observed as they assessed initial destruction. "This strikes at foundation, at history, at legacy, at proof." The Duke had coordinated containment efforts with military precision, his formal attire exchanged for practical garments that permitted direct participation rather than mere direction. Throughout darkest hours, he had worked alongside estate workers and village volunteers, aristocratic distance temporarily suspended in face of common threat. Now, as morning light revealed full extent of damage, he stood amid library's remains, cataloguing destruction with grim assessment. The worst affected section contained estate records dating back centuries, documentation of titles, transfers, agreements, and obligations that formed legal foundation for Ainsworth authority. "Not coincidental," he remarked as Mara joined him, carrying salvaged ledger whose edges bore scorch marks. "The fire began precisely where documentary evidence would prove most inconvenient to certain ambitions." "Evidence of what nature?" she asked, setting the ledger carefully atop growing collection of rescued materials. "Succession conditions." His voice lowered, though no one stood close enough to overhear. "Limitations and requirements regarding inheritance of title and lands, particularly in cases where direct male descent proves absent. Comprehension dawned gradually. Lord Calvern's position as presumptive heir depends upon specific documentation, or its absence. Precisely. The Duke moved deeper into damaged space, indicating particular cabinet whose contents had suffered severe burning. That section contained original entail documents specifying conditions under which collateral branches might claim inheritance. Without those documents, conventional primogeniture would prevail without additional qualification. Qualification of what nature? He hesitated momentarily before responding. Character assessment by current holder, approved by Crown representatives. My father instituted the provision after observing concerning tendencies in certain family branches. The provision effectively granted the Duke power to reject Calvern's succession if character proved unsuitable, power now potentially compromised through documentary destruction. Before further discussion could proceed, Mr. Lefford appeared at the library's damaged entrance, his expression suggesting urgent communication. Your Grace Village Constable has detained Mr. Silas Crowe, attempting departure by morning mail coach. The gentleman carried travelling cases suggesting extended journey rather than brief absence. The Duke's expression hardened into judicial assessment. Bring him to the estate office for questioning, discreetly. As Lefford departed to execute instruction, Mara considered implications of this development. Flight suggests guilt, though proves nothing concrete. Indeed, yet timing alone raises legitimate questions requiring answer. He surveyed the damaged chamber with contained fury. Generations of knowledge and evidence, targeted with surgical precision by those who value power above all else. The Dowager Duchess appeared at the doorway, her wheeled chair guided by attentive maid. Despite night's trauma, she maintained dignified composure, silver hair arranged beneath habitual blue ribbon. The Eastern collection is largely secured, she reported with practical assessment, though smoke damage will require extensive restoration. Mr. Willoughby from London should be summoned immediately. His expertise in document preservation may salvage what appears destroyed. Her clear gaze moved between her son and Mara, noting dishevelled appearance with approval rather than criticism. Lady Ellington, your assistance throughout this ordeal has demonstrated character beyond question. When circumstance permits, please join me for private conversation regarding matters of mutual concern. The invitation, delivered amid crisis management, nonetheless conveyed significant intention. Mara acknowledged it with respectful acceptance before returning to salvage operations as the Dowager was wheeled toward undamaged sections requiring assessment. By midday, initial emergency had resolved into organized recovery. Servants cleared debris under Butler's supervision, while more valuable items received careful documentation before removal to secure storage. The Duke had withdrawn to estate office for Crowe's interrogation, leaving Mara to coordinate continued library evacuation. She worked methodically alongside household staff, her formal gown absurdly inappropriate, yet worn with dignity that transcended circumstance. As she carefully wrapped damaged volumes in protective linen, Helena Moorcroft's unexpected arrival created momentary disruption in established rhythm. Helena entered the damaged library with theatrical horror, gloved hand pressed against lips in practiced dismay. Her morning ensemble, pale pink muslin with matching parasol, provided stark contrast to destruction surrounding her. "How utterly dreadful!" she exclaimed, addressing no one in particular, though ensuring sufficient volume for general hearing. What savage creatures would target such cultural treasure? Her gaze settled on Mara with poorly disguised satisfaction, taking in dishevelled appearance with evident pleasure. "Lady Ellington, how extraordinary to find you still present, and in such unfortunate condition." The observation, designed to highlight Mara's compromised propriety through overnight presence, nonetheless failed to achieve its intended effect. Staff members exchanged glances of quiet support, their respect for Mara's practical assistance evident despite Helena's implied criticism. "Miss Moorcroft," Mara acknowledged, without pausing her careful wrapping of damaged volume, "how thoughtful of you to call during recovery efforts. Have you come to assist?" The question, reasonable given circumstances, nonetheless created evident discomfort. Helena's perfect features arranged themselves in regretful declination. "I merely came to express concern and solidarity," she replied, careful to maintain distance from surrounding soot and debris. Lord Calvern thought it important that the community demonstrate support during Northwell's difficulty. The mention of Calvern's name in context of community support struck dissonant note given recent developments. Mara continued her methodical work, neither rising to provocation nor acknowledging its intent. How considerate. The Duke is currently occupied with urgent estate business, though I'm certain he appreciates community concern regardless of its source. Helena moved closer, lowering her voice to prevent servant overhearing. Your presence here overnight has generated considerable comment, Lady Ellington. Some might question whether crisis justifies such unconventional arrangement. Indeed. Mara met her gaze directly, neither defensive nor apologetic. How fortunate that those who value substance above appearance recognize necessity when circumstances demand it. Necessity. Helena's perfect mouth curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. Such convenient justification for questionable judgment, though perhaps judgment itself has been compromised by personal considerations. Before Mara could respond, the library door opened to admit the Duke, his expression shifting from preoccupation to controlled displeasure upon noting Helena's presence. Miss Moorcroft, he acknowledged with minimal courtesy. Your concern for Northwell's tragedy arrives with remarkable swiftness. News travels quickly when misfortune strikes distinguished household, Helena replied, composure momentarily faltering beneath his cool assessment. Lord Calvern felt immediate expression of sympathy, most appropriate under these distressing circumstances. Indeed, how curious that his concern manifests through proxy rather than personal appearance. The Duke's tone remained conversational, despite underlying steel. One might almost suspect reluctance to face direct questioning regarding his whereabouts during crucial hours. Color drained from Helena's perfect features, calculation evident in her swift recovery. Lord Calvern was at Hargrove Hall throughout the evening, as you yourself observed before your precipitous departure with Lady Ellington. Precisely. His presence established with incontrovertible evidence, while his interests were advanced by proxy elsewhere. The Duke moved to Mara's side with deliberate intention, a strategy employed since antiquity by those who prefer manipulation to direct confrontation. Helena's composure visibly faltered, fan opening with nervous energy rather than practiced grace. I'm sure I don't understand your implication, Your Grace. Lord Calvern expressed nothing but distress upon learning of Northwell's misfortune. I imagine his distress proves considerable, the Duke agreed with dangerous mildness, though perhaps not for reasons expressed in public declaration. He turned to Mara with softer expression. Lady Ellington, the Dowager has requested your presence when convenience permits. I believe current efforts have achieved sufficient organization to allow brief respite. The dismissal of Helena's presence through this redirection could not have been clearer had it been explicitly stated. She recognized defeat in this engagement, though determination remained evident beneath momentary retreat. I shall convey your sentiments to Lord Calvern, she announced, with attempt at dignified withdrawal, along with observations regarding certain arrangements that transcend conventional propriety. The implied threat to spread awareness of Mara's overnight presence at Northwell hung in air between them. The Duke's expression hardened momentarily before resuming aristocratic detachment. Please do convey complete and accurate report, Miss Moorcroft, including that Lady Ellington's presence throughout this ordeal has been conducted with my mother's explicit knowledge and approval, and that her assistance proved invaluable to preservation of irreplaceable cultural heritage. His gaze held Helena's with unflinching directness. Also convey that Northwell recognizes true character through actions rather than appearance, a standard that rewards substance over performance. The rebuke, delivered with formal courtesy that nonetheless cut with surgical precision, left Helena momentarily speechless. She recovered with visible effort, executing abbreviated curtsy before departing with what dignity remained available. Once she had gone, the Duke turned to Mara with genuine concern. Forgive the strategic use of your presence, though truth required no embellishment. No forgiveness necessary, she replied, removing protective gloves to reveal hands reddened from hours of careful work. Though, I wonder whether escalation rather than resolution will result from this encounter. Perhaps. His expression suggested grim recognition of battles yet to come, though certain developments may render further maneuvers ineffective. Mr. Crow's interrogation proved productive, sufficiently so to warrant his continued detention by proper authorities. The Duke lowered his voice despite their relative privacy. Financial inducement leaves documentary evidence, particularly when recipient proves insufficiently careful regarding personal correspondence. Hope mingled with caution in Mara's response. Evidence of instructions regarding the fire? Not explicitly stated, yet sufficiently suggestive when combined with physical evidence recovered from his belongings. The Duke's expression remained judicial rather than triumphant. Justice will proceed according to evidence rather than conjecture, regardless of personal conviction. They proceeded toward the main house, where the Dowager awaited in her private sitting room. As they walked, Mara became acutely conscious of her disheveled appearance, formal gown stained and wrinkled, hair escaping remaining pins, hands bearing evidence of practical labor rather than decorative idleness. "Perhaps I should make myself presentable before attending her grace," she suggested, glancing down at ruined silk. The Duke followed her gaze, unexpected warmth suffusing his austere features. "My mother has already observed your condition throughout the night, Lady Ellington. Indeed, I suspect your appearance in its current state will confirm rather than diminish her existing assessment." The observation, delivered with quiet certainty, nonetheless quickened Mara's pulse. What assessment had the Dowager formed, and what confirmation would her disheveled state provide? The question remained unanswered as they approached the sitting room's ornate door. Lady Celestine sat near the window, morning light illuminating her silver hair and blue ribbon with almost symbolic clarity. She turned as they entered, her expression revealing approval despite circumstances' gravity. "Lady Ellington," she began without preliminary social exchange, "I believe current crisis has accelerated certain discussions that might otherwise have proceeded at more conventional pace." The statement, direct and unadorned, suggested conversation of significant import, despite informal setting and inappropriate attire. The Duke positioned himself near the fireplace, neither withdrawing from the exchange nor dominating its direction. "Recent events have clarified certain truths beyond question," the Dowager continued, her clear gaze holding Mara's with quiet intensity. "Among them, the nature of your character and its compatibility with Northwell's requirements." Mara remained silent, uncertain whether response was expected or interruption would prove unwelcome. The Dowager smiled slightly at her composure before continuing. "My son's position demands particular qualities in potential partnership, qualities frequently misunderstood by those who value appearance above substance." Her hands smoothed invisible wrinkle from her dress with practiced precision. "The ability to face crisis with dignity, to value knowledge above convenience, to recognize worth beyond conventional assessment, these prove far more valuable than youth or beauty or fashionable accomplishment." The conversation's direction became increasingly clear, though Mara maintained composed attention rather than presumptive anticipation. The Dowager's smile deepened at this continued restraint. "I have observed your interaction these past months with particular interest, Lady Ellington. Your responses to provocation, your genuine appreciation of intellectual pursuits, your dignity amid deliberate attempts at humiliation, all reveal character of substance rather than performance." She glanced toward her son, something passing between them that required no verbal articulation. Recent crisis merely confirmed what careful observation had already established. When confronted with genuine need, you acted with practical compassion rather than decorative sympathy. The Duke moved forward, taking position beside his mother's chair. "What my mother expresses with characteristic directness, Lady Ellington, is her approval of certain possibilities that recent events have brought into sharper focus." "Possibilities," Mara repeated carefully, heart accelerating despite attempt at composed restraint. "The possibility," he continued with quiet certainty, "that connection formed through mutual recognition might evolve toward more permanent arrangement should such evolution prove mutually desired." The statement, delivered with formal restraint that nonetheless conveyed genuine emotion beneath its surface, hung in morning air between them. Not proposal itself, but acknowledgement of its potential. Path illuminated, though not yet formally offered nor accepted. Such arrangement, Mara observed after momentary silence, would inevitably provoke significant resistance from certain quarters. Indeed, the Dowager's expression combined wisdom with determination. All worthy ventures face opposition proportionate to their value. The question remains whether potential reward justifies inevitable struggle. The Duke's gaze held Mara's with quiet intensity. "That question, Lady Ellington, I leave to your consideration, with assurance that its answer, whatever form it takes, will be respected with the same esteem that prompted its asking." Transformation complete, the conversation had shifted from implicit understanding to explicit acknowledgement. territory that custom dictated should follow established progression rather than crisis-accelerated recognition. Yet, circumstances had revealed truth that conventional courtship might have obscured or prolonged. Before Mara could formulate response worthy of the moment's significance, a servant appeared at the doorway, urgency evident in his interruption of private conversation. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. Lord Calvern has arrived demanding immediate audience regarding Mr. Crow's detention." The Duke's expression hardened into judicial assessment. "Inform Lord Calvern that I shall receive him in the estate office in 15 minutes. His patience until then would be appreciated, though not required." As the servant departed, the Dowager reached forward to take Mara's hand in momentary connection. "Some conversations benefit from reflection rather than immediate conclusion," she observed with gentle understanding. "We shall resume at more appropriate moment, when crisis permits contemplation its proper space." The interruption, though frustrating in its timing, nonetheless granted necessary interval for consideration. Mara departed to restore her appearance to acceptable condition, mind-traversing implications and possibilities with equal measures of hope and caution. By the time she had changed into borrowed day dress and arranged her hair into semblance of propriety, confrontation between the Duke and Lord Calvern had concluded, its results evident in the latter's hasty departure from Northwell grounds, observed by staff with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Justice proceeds with appropriate momentum," the Duke informed her when they reconnected in the partially restored library that afternoon. "Evidence, once examined, presents compelling narrative, regardless of social position or convenient absence." The statement suggested resolution beyond immediate crisis, path forward illuminated though not yet fully traveled. As they stood amid rescued volumes and salvaged knowledge, connection between them seemed similarly preserved, despite calculated assault. "No one marries a woman like me," Mara observed quietly, echoing words spoken months earlier in very different circumstance. The Duke's expression softened into genuine smile that transformed his austere features. "Then they know little of love," he replied, completing exchange begun in winter darkness and continuing now toward spring's renewal. Outside, first blossoms appeared on ancient apple trees, white flowers against dark branches, promise emerging from winter's necessary dormancy. Summer's golden light spilled across Northwell Gardens, transforming formal paths and cultivated borders into dreamscape of color and fragrance. A year had passed since Library Fire, 12 months of restoration, revelation, and gradual renewal that had altered both physical structure and those who inhabited it. Mara stood before the East Wing's tall windows, observing workers as they completed final touches on rebuilt library. The chamber had been restored with scrupulous attention to original design, though certain improvements had been incorporated: better ventilation, more effective protection against future damage, enhanced organization of irreplaceable volumes. Her reflection gazed back from polished glass, a woman neither young nor conventionally beautiful, yet possessed of quiet dignity that transcended mere appearance. The past year had brought subtle changes, increased confidence in her movements, serenity in her expression, purpose in her posture. "Admiring our progress?" The Duke's voice came from behind her, familiar now in its cadence and timbre. "Admiring persistence against determined opposition," she replied, turning to face him. "Knowledge preserved despite attempt at destruction." He joined her at the window, their reflections appearing side by side in glass, complementary rather than identical, each enhancing rather than diminishing the other's presence. "The final volumes return from London restorers next week," he observed, professional satisfaction evident in his tone. "Mr. Willoughby has performed miracles of preservation. Documents thought destroyed have yielded their contents to his expertise, including certain succession conditions, I understand." "Indeed." His expression combined satisfaction with judicial detachment, complete enough to withstand legal challenge, should such challenge materialize. Lord Calvern had departed England following evidence discovered in Crow's possession. Not formal exile, but strategic withdrawal to continental properties, where disgrace might fade with distance and time. Silas Crow himself faced transportation for arson, his testimony regarding suggestions from his employer, insufficient to transfer legal culpability, yet damning enough to render social rehabilitation impossible. Helena had married a baronet from northern counties, her golden beauty and accomplished performance finding appreciative audience far from Northwell's influence. Occasional reports suggested contentment in arrangement, founded on mutual understanding of transactional nature. beauty exchanged for position, wealth paired with youth, each recognizing practical advantage despite romantic narrative's absence. The Dowager Duchess observed these developments with quiet satisfaction, her blue ribbon remaining constant adornment despite other changes. Her health had improved with spring's arrival, wheeled chair increasingly abandoned for short walks through restored gardens with Jonathan Lefford's steady support. "Mother has requested your presence at this afternoon's reading circle," the Duke mentioned, as they moved from window toward corridor, "though I suspect literary discussion serves merely as pretext for continued planning." Mara smiled at the observation, fondness evident beneath mild exasperation. The Dowager had embraced wedding preparations with determination that occasionally bordered on excessive enthusiasm, her practical nature temporarily surrendering to ceremonial consideration. "Indulge her excitement," Mara advised gently. "This represents culmination of hopes long harbored yet seldom expressed." "I indulge with appropriate gratitude," he replied, hand finding hers with established comfort. "Though I maintain certain aspects warrant restraint rather than elaboration." Their engagement, announced 3 months after the fire, once evidence had secured necessary justice, had generated precisely expected responses throughout society: surprise, speculation, calculation, assessment, each reaction revealing more about observer than subject. Yet approval from quarters that mattered most had been immediate and genuine. The Dowager's sitting room welcomed them with familiar comfort, afternoon light filtering through lace curtains, tea service arranged on mahogany table, botanical volumes selected for discussion placed in precise arrangement. Lady Celestine herself sat in her accustomed chair, blue ribbon bright against silver hair, expression suggesting thoughts beyond immediate circumstance. "Ah, there you are," she gestured toward opposite chairs with graceful authority. "I've been reviewing potential arrangements for the wedding breakfast. The South Terrace offers superior light, though the formal dining room provides greater convenience should weather prove uncooperative." The Duke exchanged amused glance with Mara before addressing his mother with patient affection. Considering the ceremony remains 6 weeks distant, perhaps immediate decision might await further contemplation. "Preparation prevents disappointment," the Dowager replied with unassailable logic. "Lady Ellington understands necessity of proper planning, particularly when certain elements remain beyond control. Among those uncontrollable elements numbered public response to their marriage, aristocratic widow of unremarkable lineage joining ducal household through personal preference rather than dynastic calculation. Though society had largely accepted their engagement with polite recognition, if not enthusiastic celebration, certain whispers persisted in drawing rooms beyond Northwell's influence. "I received response from Lady Worcester regarding attendance," the Dowager continued, consulting meticulously maintained correspondence book. "Her acceptance arrives with particular note regarding your courage in following personal inclination despite conventional expectation." Rowan. "I believe she intends compliment rather than criticism, though distinction occasionally proves difficult to discern in her communication. Lady Worcester's approval or disapproval concerns me considerably less than the participant's satisfaction," the Duke replied with equanimity born of genuine indifference to external assessment. Mara observed their exchange with quiet appreciation, still occasionally startled by reality that had emerged from winter's unexpected beginning. The conversation at Hargrove Hall's entrance, "No one marries a woman like me," met with, "Then you know little of love," had transformed from momentary connection to permanent commitment through months of shared experience and growing certainty. Their courtship, conducted with propriety that nonetheless acknowledged established understanding, had progressed through spring's renewal and summer's flourishing. Intellectual companionship deepened into emotional partnership, respect evolved toward affection, appreciation matured into love that required no dramatic declaration yet pervaded every interaction. The formal proposal had come on midsummer evening, garden roses perfuming air around them as they walked paths illuminated by setting sun. No theatrical gesture or elaborate speech, simply quiet question asked with dignity that honored both questioner and recipient. "Lady Ellington, Mara, would you consider marriage between us? Not as resolution to difficulty or response to expectation, but as recognition of what has grown beyond either anticipation or design." Her acceptance, equally unadorned yet complete in its certainty, had sealed understanding that had been building since winter library encounters. "I would consider it life's most unexpected grace," she had replied, truth requiring no embellishment through elaborate phrase. Now as wedding approached with increasing momentum, Mara occasionally found herself momentarily disoriented by transformation's scope. From widow of modest means to future duchess, from social periphery to household centre, from resigned solitude to purposeful partnership. "Lady Ellington?" The dowager's voice recalled her from reflection. "You seem momentarily absent despite physical presence." "Forgive my wandering attention," Mara replied with honest acknowledgement. "I find myself occasionally overwhelmed by journey's distance from beginning to present position." The dowager's expression softened into understanding smile. Transformation seldom follows anticipated path, particularly when heart rather than calculation guides its direction. Their discussion continued through practical matters, guest accommodations, musical selections, floral arrangements, each detail addressed with characteristic thoroughness. The Duke contributed when necessary, though largely content to observe interaction between mother and future wife, with evident satisfaction in their established harmony. Later, as afternoon light lengthened toward evening, Mara found opportunity for solitary reflection in Northwell's rose garden. The space, meticulously maintained through Jonathan Lefford's expertise, offered quiet sanctuary amid wedding preparations' increasing activity. Seeking momentary escape, the Duke's voice interrupted her contemplation, though his presence brought welcome rather than intrusion. "Merely quiet appreciation," she replied, making room for him on stone bench positioned to catch late sunshine. "Sometimes joy requires solitary recognition to be fully comprehended." He settled beside her, propriety no longer requiring measured distance between them when chaperoned by garden boundaries. "You speak profound truth with characteristic simplicity, Lady Ellington." "I shall become Lady Ainsworth in mere weeks," she observed with mild correction, "though identity transforms less readily than title." "Your essential nature requires no transformation," he replied with quiet certainty. "Its recognition rather than alteration forms our connection's foundation." Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than expectant, filled with understanding that required no constant articulation. Roses nodded in gentle breeze, their fragrance enveloping the moment in sensory perfection. "I find myself reflecting on our journey's beginning," Mara said finally. "That winter evening when whispered doubt met unexpected contradiction. 'No one marries a woman like me,'" he quoted from memory, the words now carrying different weight than in their original utterance. "Words spoken from resignation rather than invitation," she acknowledged. "Yet you answered with conviction that transcended conventional assessment. Then you know little of love." His expression softened into rare smile that transformed austere features, truth spoken without calculation or expectation of consequence. Mara studied his face in golden afternoon light, features neither classically handsome nor conventionally appealing, yet infinitely precious through association with mind and character they expressed. "You recognized something I had forgotten existed," she said simply. "Dignity beyond circumstance, worth beyond appearance, possibility beyond resignation." "I recognized kindred spirit," he corrected gently. "Soul that values substance above performance, truth above convenience, connection above convention." He reached into pocket, extracting small object wrapped in silk handkerchief. "I have something for you. Not wedding gift, but private token requiring no public acknowledgement." The handkerchief revealed small silver mirror, the same she had carried that first evening, now mounted in new frame of simple elegance. Along its edge, words had been engraved in flowing script. "Truth reflected grows more certain with each viewing." "You transformed how I saw myself," Mara said quietly, fingers tracing engraved message, "not through flattery or falsehood, but through honest recognition of what remained when appearance and circumstance were set aside." "The mirror merely reflects what exists," he replied, his hand covering hers where it rested on silver surface. "Though certain observers perceive with greater clarity than passing fashion permits." Above them, swallows traced graceful patterns against deepening blue, summer's messengers celebrating season's fullness. From nearby rose beds came subtle fragrance of flowers opening in evening coolness, their beauty offered without requirement for acknowledgement or praise. "In 6 weeks, we exchange formal vows," the Duke observed, his voice carrying quiet certainty beneath its surface. "Yet I consider myself already bound by recognition that transcends ceremony's public declaration." "As do I," Mara replied simply, truth requiring no elaborate expression. They remained in garden until dinner gong summoned them to practical routine, their connection no longer requiring constant declaration, yet deepening with each shared moment. The mirror nestled in Mara's pocket, its presence reminder of journey from winter resignation to summer certainty. Northwell Hall gleamed in evening light, its windows illuminated against approaching darkness. Within its walls, preparations continued for celebration that would publicly acknowledge what private understanding had already established. Connection founded on recognition rather than convention, partnership built on mutual value rather than calculated advantage. As they entered together, Mara paused momentarily at threshold, hand resting lightly on his arm in gesture both formal and intimate. "No one marries a woman like me," she said softly, echoing original statement now transformed through experience and understanding. His smile, rare, genuine, transformative, provided answer before words could form. "Then they know little of love," he replied, completing exchange begun in winter darkness and continuing now toward lifetime's shared illumination. In a world that measures worth by youth and beauty, by wealth and station, by the ephemeral qualities that time inevitably claims, there exists a profound truth. Love, at its most authentic, sees beyond society's narrow calculations. True love is not blind. Rather, it possesses the clearest vision, recognizing dignity where others see only ordinariness, discovering treasure where convention perceives only plainness. We are each in our way Lady Mara, bearing scars of disappointment, carrying the weight of how others have defined us, sometimes believing the whispers that tell us we are unworthy of profound connection. And yet, there exists in this world those rare souls who possess the wisdom to see beyond surface, who understand that character crafted through adversity shines with light more enduring than mere beauty. What transforms us is not finding someone who overlooks our flaws, but someone who recognizes that our perceived imperfections are merely society's myopic judgment, who smiles at our self-doubt and says with quiet certainty, "Then you know little of love." The journey from resignation to redemption begins not when we change ourselves to fit the world's expectations, but when we find the courage to stand in our authentic truth and allow ourselves to be truly seen. For in being seen, fully, completely, without disguise, we discover that we were worthy all along. If this tale of dignified love and quiet redemption touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories that illuminate the soul's journey toward authentic connection. How has someone in your life seen your true worth when you doubted it yourself? Share your experience in the comments below, for in sharing our stories, we help others recognize that they too deserve to be truly seen and deeply loved. Until our next journey together through the landscapes of the heart, with warmest regards, Victorian Romance Audio Stories.